What is going on, guys? Welcome back to another episode here of the Mets Central podcast. Today, we are going to talk about the series that just occurred where the Mets beat the Colorado Rockies in 2 out of the 3 games. Of course, the first one being very disappointing, considering the fact that, like we said, rolling into the series, anything short of a sweep was going to be disappointing to us. But they did rebound in a nice way, especially in this last game where there were a lot better of things to take away and a lot more positives. Unfortunately, there are still some things in this game that do worry me going forward, which we'll get into, of course. But yeah, we have a lot to talk about when it comes to that. Give updates on, certain prospects, give updates on injuries and all that other stuff like we do every single week. Before we jump into everything, please be sure to leave a like on your way in. If you're watching on the YouTube side of things, please be sure to subscribe and turn on your notifications so you know when we upload or go live. But let's get into this thing. Matt, how we feeling? Even though I think I know the answer, because again, we talked about it, but disappointing.
Yeah, so obviously I'm happy they got the 2 wins to finish the series and salvage the series. But like I mentioned before, you had to sweep the Rockies. You had to. I mean, they're 4-2 against them this year. Like, all right, cool. Maybe don't sweep them both, but they should have at least gone 5-1 against the Rockies this year. I mean, and what a funny concept. You take a look at the Rockies, right? They play in a city known as the Mile High City, a ballpark with one of the biggest outfield or the biggest outfield in the MLB. They have a shitty pitching staff, both starter wise and bullpen wise. They have surprisingly a very good infield defense. So, what's the key to beating the Colorado Rockies? Definitely not putting the ball on the ground like the Mets did like 5 million times the first 2 games. Definitely is like what we saw in today's game, especially in the first inning. Put the ball in the air. What a surprise! You drive the ball far, doubles, home runs, hit 3 today actually. The only 3 in the series that the Mets guy came in this game. But yeah, what a concept! Hitting the ball in the air in a very hitter friendly park.
Yeah, and that's something that I preached in my post game. And to get to quickly the thing about them not to them not scoring a lot of runs in the first portion of this series, especially even in game 2. Like game 2, they won that game, but it was really infuriating. More so the first game, obviously, because they lost, and on top of that, like we talked about the bullpen, but it was even more infuriating game 2 when you saw Feltner have to leave after the first inning, and they still took forever to rally off of them. It took it till the ninth inning, but both those games were infuriating. But yeah, like you talked about, all they need to do is hit the ball in the air. They have the corpse of Chris Bryant just roaming in that outfield right now. And your thought is, yeah, let's just hit it to the hot corner where Ryan McMahon's just making every single play imaginable. And I know it's easier said than done, obviously, to just simply hit the ball in the air and to not hit it right to Ryan McMahon. But it's also hard to argue that you shouldn't be doing that when it's what has got you to this record and got you to a spot where now you're sitting second in the National League East, which is something that you could take away as a positive, though, at the end of the series, which a lot of that we have to attribute to the Milwaukee Brewers just absolutely shit pounding the Atlanta Braves. Like, that's what I wanted the Mets to do to them. And unfortunately, after games 1 and 2, that did not come to fruition. But thankfully, the Brewers did that for us. And now the Mets sit above the wild card line. While it's so beautiful to see the Braves below it, you got to be a sick person to enjoy their downfall. Put me in the hospital then, because I am deathly ill. But yeah, with the first 2 games though in particular, it was just really frustrating, especially because of the fact that this offense has a knack, it feels like, for just pissing away base runners. There's just no way around it. And in that second game, I think it was the second game in particular, it was so annoying that or I shouldn't say one inning, but that sequence of events in multiple innings where they were just trying to hit in the double plays at will, and it just ended up being force outs because the Rockies couldn't complete their defensive plays. But yeah, we'll talk more obviously about that sort of deal. I think though we should start with game 1 where they lost and get that out of the way and talk about the thing that I think is probably the topic of Mets world right now in terms of what's on the top of the concern list. And that is Luis Severino, because he did not look good at all. And it's becoming a thing where it's an issue because he quickly went from the Mets' most reliable arm, where all of us penciled him in as, all right, the Mets make the playoffs. He's the sure ace. He's surely the guy that is getting the ball in game one. To now it's like, are you getting the ball in the rotation at all come playoff time? Because if he's going to keep pitching like this, there's no way. And I get that people want to run with the excuse that, because they were mentioning on the broadcast, and I just hate that they were doing it, because why is it affect Severino but nobody else and not the Rockies? And why wasn't it affecting some of the other pitchers on the Mets about, oh, his stuff wasn't breaking as much. Oh, his stuff was a little bit worse because of the ballpark. Or it's the fact that he just hasn't been pitching good. And it's the fact that he has a lot of mileage on him this season compared to previous seasons. He has not pitched above, I forgot what the inning total was, but it's been a while since he's thrown this many innings. It's been since like 2018, I believe it was. Yeah, 2018 is the last time he threw above 120 innings. So this is the first time since then. He's going to get fatigued. And that's where I'm worried. And that's where you really also wish obviously we wish for other reasons that Senga didn't get hurt, but right now they'd have a 6-man rotation, and I think that would benefit Severino, because if this is what's going to be from him, it's not cutting it.
Well, yeah, obviously we wish the Senga injury never happened. We wish Christian Scott would be up here right now and pitching instead of sitting on the sidelines, and it's part of the reason why we wanted another starter at the deadline. I know we got Blackburn, but we really wanted that ace type, like a guy like Blake Snell. It didn't happen, but yeah, like you mentioned, he hasn't thrown a lot of innings the last couple of years, and whether that was just due to injuries or him just not pitching well at all. I know, like last year, it wasn't really the injuries that got him. He was just bad last year, and I think that was maybe more in terms of tipping pitches, because that was the rumors. But that game in Colorado, I mean, I did like that his velocity wasn't down, because that was the major scare that we got from that Twins game where he just got lit up. His velocity was down. So, yeah, his velocity was up this game. Like you mentioned, the break wasn't there. I didn't think he pitched terribly. I just thought he was mid. He did get unlucky with the J. Cave home run, because off the bat you thought that was just a standard flyout, but obviously in Colorado and Denver, that's going to be a home run most of the time, just because of the less air resistance against the ball. But yeah, he's got to be better. He's got to be better. And look, hopefully maybe if Scott comes back soon, or they decide to move Budo to the rotation, which probably won't happen, and go to a 6-man and just to help him rest a bit more in between starts. But yeah, we desperately need an ace type pitch right now. And Severino, obviously, before the emergence of Sean Manaea right now, he was the guy that we relied on. But it's going to be tough, because like we mentioned before, if he's going to start degrading in terms of just quality starts, because he hasn't had many miles on his arm over the last couple of years, then it's going to be concerning. And then obviously you could go from, he's been healthy so far this year, but could we potentially start seeing some injuries pop up again? It's a scary idea because because he hasn't pitched a lot over the last couple of years.
Yeah, and that's my issue though. Like you mentioned with the JK home run, it's kind of like it is what it is. But that's where I also have the issue with letting him off the hook with this one, because it's like it's been a reoccurring issue now. Like outside of that start against Washington and Miami, outside of those two starts, I should say, it's kind of been like lackluster. He wasn't bad against Atlanta. He wasn't particularly great though, but you know, you look at that Pittsburgh start early July, not good. You look at the Minnesota start, obviously, terrible. And then, you know, dating back to June when it was the Astros, there's definitely something to be said that there's an issue here, or it's just him regressing back to the mean, and it's a little bit of both his arm catching up and the fact that maybe he's not as good as what we saw earlier in the year, and this is just who he really is, where this is the mean when it comes to Luis Severino. But again, it really didn't matter how he pitched in this game, because to get back on track with this one and talk about the game as a whole, it really didn't matter because Alex Young had his worst outing as a Met, which honestly, fine, get that out of the way in a game that was either way a loss because your offense was just completely putrid and provided nothing for you at all. There were multiple opportunities for the Mets to potentially get on the board, and they didn't. And it's annoying because in that second inning, it looked like, all right, they're probably going to cruise their way to a win, especially against Kyle Freeland. And he ended up leaving the game fairly early, and you got to that bullpen. It's like, all right, this should be a game that you win, but it wasn't going to happen when Vientos went 0 for 4. It wasn't going to happen when JD Martinez went 0 for 3. You just had guys getting hits in non-clutch situations like Pete Alonso in that game. But yeah, that first game was really just, it was aggravating to say the least, because it was so winnable. And this sums up the whole series, which I will mention quickly before I let you go. But it bothered me so much, and this again doesn't have to just do because of the Mets loss. This was the entire series. The umps this entire series
The umps were brutal.
were abysmal. Like, I've never seen them be so bipolar with the strike zone. I've never seen them. I mean, the Rockies just can't even maintain their own ballpark. And in that first game, you have one of them go under the netting. And by the way, Severino not backing up the play. Shocking.
Yeah, that's what.
But like, and they let that run come in. It's like, I don't know what was going on with the umps in this entire series as a whole, because it went both ways where, I think it was Freeland actually in that same game, or it might have been the second game where a pitcher was shaken up and the trainer went out for the Rockies, and they didn't even let him throw a warm-up pitch. Like, what are we talking about here?
No, yeah, I was going to mention that before. A part of the reason why they lost that first game too, the defense was brutal. I mean, on the first run, the ball's into the outfield. Bader picks it up. He overthrows Lindor. It gets past him. Sevy's not backing him up, and then Vientos. I get it. It's unlucky with the netting, but he's got to scoop that ball and make sure that ball doesn't hit the netting. And Vientos had a brutal defensive game that night too, especially on the offensive side. He cost them on that fifth run where it was an easy ground ball, and it went off his glove. But at least he bounced back today though with the home run. So happy to see that with Vientos, because obviously he was a little bit in a mini slump, but good to see that happening. And like people have complained about Vientos and his defense, and like I've said before in previous podcasts, when you looked at his defense this year, it's actually not been terrible. He's actually been a solid, reliable third baseman in terms of defense. It's just it's one of those games where he just had a rough night at the hot corner.
I also think either way that ties to our conversation as to why we think Pete's probably going to go at the end of the year and Vientos will probably shift the first, but that's a conversation for another day entirely, because right now we're here to talk about the Rocky series, where in game 2, a lot more of positives to take away for sure, especially on the pitching side, where there was nothing but positives, because Paul Blackburn has continued to surprise me, to say the least. Like I mentioned in my post game, I'm not going to fill out the apology form just yet because I want to see it against a quality opponent. But as of thus far, you're getting volume. You're getting good strikeout stuff. He's not walking guys. He's giving you what this rotation has needed. Volume, strikeouts, lack of walks. And for that, I will absolutely take it and run with it. I don't like, personally, that they used Jose Budo in this game. I feel like this was a night where you should have probably avoided using him for the 2 innings, especially knowing who was on the mound for the next day. Not that it mattered because they ended up winning, but that was kind of my thought in my head when that happened. And then also the thing that I mentioned on my post game, and I still feel this way about Jose Budo, it's like, at what point are you going to just surrender and say, all right, he's a reliever, we're just going to use him in high leverage spots, and we're not going to be afraid to use him for 1 inning, if it means he's going to be available the next day, because we want him available consecutive days. It's either you fully commit or you don't to this thing, I feel like, at this point. And especially because you're quickly entering mid-August, which is just crazy because we were talking about this stuff in July. But you're quickly entering mid-August. It's like you got to make a decision here if you're going to be full in on him being the reliever or if you are going to move him back to the rotation, because there are days where you're going to need a guy like Jose Budo consecutively. But to counter that, you could also say you want him to get his 2 innings because the bullpen's getting reinforcement soon. I get that. But I don't know. I still feel I'd rather him get quality outs on consecutive nights, especially because if Diaz has to be worked a lot down the stretch, which he also pitched in this game, I'm glad he allowed a run in this game where it was already a lock that they were going to win, so didn't care. He looked fine also. Like, it was really that one little miscue. He was fine outside of that, so I'm not worried there. But, yeah, I don't know your thoughts on that situation where with Jose Budo, but for me personally, I'd like to see them give him maybe even save opportunities.
Yeah, definitely, because he's shown that even in close games when he has to come in, he's shown that he's reliable and he can get the outs. I forgot. I think it was the second game of the Rockies series at Citi Field. He had to come in and he gave like 2 valuable innings and he didn't go up a run that game. So obviously he can do that. The only usage of Budo, which I've questioned and I just found completely odd, was the first game of the Twins series when they absolutely shelled the Twins 15-1. And Quintana started that game. He gave him 6 good innings, and Budo just came in to pitch the last 3 innings. I'm like, listen, I get it. I get it. You want to keep him stretched out because obviously, you don't know what in terms of injuries what's going to happen, and he could be moved to the rotation just in case. But I mean, if you want to stretch him out, like do it in a closer game. Like the next game of that series, they won 2-0. So I mean, you could have used them there. But then, really, the spot where you could have used them was the last game of the series of that Twins where Sevy got shelled and he only pitched 3 innings. So instead of using Tyler McGill out there as a guy to eat innings, use a guy like Jose Budo, who said shown he's a lot better than Tyler McGill, and McGill shouldn't be anywhere near this roster anymore because he's just simply not good
Unless
enough.
he's in the bullpen.
Even in the bullpen, it's like I know, like, he only give 1 run, but still, he did get bailed out a couple of times when I was watching that game live at Citi Field. But yeah, that second game was just if the Mets were trying to do their best job at trying to put together a 21-22 Gerard Gallant Ranger style game, they did a hell of a job doing that. Playing down your competition, making it close to the end of the game, and then just exploding at the end. And, of course, relying on your pitching, which is similar like relying on Igor to get you through most of the game. But, yeah, I mean, just like you take a look at the ERA of some of these guys that pitched in the second game. Feltner, 5.
They
Davis.
threw Chase and Shreve out there.
Davis, 4.73. Shreve, 0 ERA, but that was his first appearance in the MLB this year. And we know that Chase and Shreve is not that good other than when he was here in 2021 and he actually looked decent. Or it was 2020 he was here. Shivili, 4.82. Kinley, 6.84. Vodnik, 4.05. Lawrence, 5.77. They really couldn't scratch together runs against that bullpen. Ugh. At least they did it in the 9th off probably Vodnik, who's probably their best reliever. And even still, he's not great, but it's got to be better. And listen, at least they did it in this game where they shelled them early in the game, which you're supposed to do against a bad Rockies team.
Yeah, and to get back with the Budo thing, I think it's tough because it's just such a fine line between you want this guy to be able to come in situations where your starter can't give you volume and you just need a guy to come in and eat innings because you don't want to tax your entire bullpen. But you also are in an awkward spot because it's like, this guy could get high leverage outs. This guy is probably one of your most reliable relievers. But my question is then, you had a guy like Danny Young throw 2 innings today. Why can't he just be in that role? Like, I'd rather use a lesser guy like Danny Young. And I get that he's not built for that type of workload as much as Jose Budo, but I'm sorry, and no offense to Danny Young, but I'd much rather run his arm into the ground before Jose Budo, who looks like a very valuable piece and a guy that's going to get big outs come September, October. So that's just my final 2 cents on that. And yeah, we'll shift gears in terms of the conversation with the offense in this game, which I initially was pissed off, in the group chat, because I texted that Winker was hitting third. Dap me up, Mr. Winker. Dap me up, because he came through and got 3 hits and got his biggest hit thus far as a Met. Ended up getting a big RBI in that game late. And on top of that, I mean, Lindor, clutch moment there. Alvarez, it was nice to see him actually start to hit, because I still have worries with him right now on how much that shoulder is affecting him, and it's very clear it is, because earlier in the season, this is not what Alvarez was doing. He was playing way better at a way higher level, which again, I know I said he had a good game, but still, you got the point of that. And I mean, you even got quality at bats from Ben Gamel in this game, and it's insane that he was hitting 8th in the lineup, and you're getting quality ABs from him. I don't know. Ben Gamel winning his way onto the roster, I don't know. But, yeah, it was nice to see them at least come through at some point. Like you said before, I mean, you look at the numbers on this entire Rockies pitching staff. I mean, they used pretty much their entire bullpen in that game because they had to. And it took you forever to get runs, which sucks. But I guess better late than never. I don't know.
Yeah, the Alvey one's interesting because obviously he's been struggling for the last month with his bat. He's had a couple shaky moments defensively, and obviously we know Alvey as a very good, reliable defensive catcher. I mean, obviously we saw the one where they made it, the Rockies tied up at 2-2. The reason why, I forgot who the runner was on second base, but the reason why he ended up scoring on that Chris Bryant dribbler down the third base line, which was Chris Bryant's favorite hit of the whole his favorite types of hit the whole series, little dribblers down the third base line. But the only reason why that guy was able to advance to third base on the last at bat was because he let a pass ball go by him, which it should have been simply caught. So I know I've seen some crazy things on Twitter, especially people are saying, "Oh, you got to send Alvarez down to the minors." I'm like, no. Why would you do that? It's just no. He's struggling right now, but just people. But
no, I know. I'm not saying you, but it's like that's more of a rhetorical question, like asking people that are saying that, who the hell do you want them to call up? Do we even know who the third catcher is right now for this team? Because I know they DFA'd that guy they got from like the Royals or whatever it is. Like, do we even know the third catcher? I don't want to know the third catcher. I can tell you that right now.
No, yeah. I don't know because Narvaez's not here anymore. Nito's with the Cubs. So I don't even know who the third catcher is.
Yeah, I don't know, and I don't want to know. I don't want to know either. I don't want to have to find out.
They're gonna bring back Rene Rivera. Don't worry.
Oh, for like 10th go around, yeah.
No, but yeah. So I mean, look, he was struggling, but you gotta. He's a young kid. He's 21 years old, 22 years old. You gotta let him play through his struggles. It's gonna happen. But the one positive that I liked with Alvey the last game was he did, because he had 2 hits. He had the triple and he had the single. You started seeing him he started going opposite side of the field more instead of pulling. Now, look, I understand he's a power hitter. That's his main thing. Even though he hasn't had a lot of home runs this year, I think he only has like 6 or something. Alvey's a power hitter, so naturally he's going to pull the ball more. But you notice that when Alvey's in his groove and it looks like he's unstoppable, he's using opposite field a lot more. And the 2 hits he got last night, the single and the triple, both were opposite field. So that's a good sign. So obviously he got the day off today, but hopefully, that triple just starts to wake him up.
Yeah, and it was hilarious seeing him freaking run out of gas there by the end of it. That Bader had to come in the pinch run. But yeah, I'm completely fine with also the fact that the Mets are kind of being cautious with Alvarez, where they're not going to throw him out there every day just for the sake of having the name value out there, especially when Luis Torrens is playing at the level he is right now, which there's been a slight dip in his play as of lately at the plate. But still, I mean, he hasn't been too bad. Like, even today, he was 1 for 4 with a walk. So you're getting serviceable play from him to where you don't have to trot him out there every day. But
the man in the seats, what a find.
What a find by Stearns. And honestly, as much as it sucked before when Alvarez was hurt earlier in the season, it helped them find Torrens. So that's the only positive you could ever take away from that.
I'm pretty sure Torrens was the first catcher to throw an opposition stealer out at second base. I'm
I
pretty
mean,
sure he was the first guy.
he probably was. It makes sense. It honestly makes sense because Alvarez was kind of he got hurt pretty quickly, and then yeah, like Tomas Nito wasn't doing that. Omar Narvaez wasn't doing that, so makes a lot of sense. But yeah, to transition now over to today's game that happened earlier today. When it comes to the lineup, you just are in love with what you saw because you look at the box score and you see every single guy in the lineup contributed for a hit. And most importantly, Pete Alonso had a very big game, getting 2 home runs, which please start to pull the ball more. Please do that more if you want to back what you said about how you're having a great season. You're on pace for 40. If you want to go on the hottest stretch we've ever seen you go on and go on an Aaron Judge type tear where you're hitting a home run basically every game they get to 40, by all means do it. Please do it because a day like today, it freaking helped. JD Martinez, how about in general, though, the doubles they got? They got double after double after double in that first inning to start the game. Lindor coming up clutch time and time again like he did in the game before. Mark Vientos had a home run, which, like you mentioned earlier, in a bit of a slump, so it was nice to see him contribute. Tyrone Taylor continues to be the most Jekyll and Hyde player I've seen, but his defense today was very good, which I'm very glad Mendoza put him in left field instead of McNeil, because I could tell you right now this game would have been closer if McNeil was out there and left instead of Tyrone
Yeah,
Taylor. But
he had that nice one play in the 5th inning when the bases were loaded and Peterson was struggling a bit. He made that nice catch at the wall.
yeah, which we'll get to Peterson, but yeah, overall thoughts obviously on the offensive side of things for today.
Great. I mean, they put the ball in the air. What what more could you not like? I mean, I'm pretty sure I heard this on, I think it was on the radio, that this was they had 5 extra base hits in the first inning. The first time ever in Mets franchise history where they had 5 extra base hits in the first inning. So good to see, obviously. But yeah, like you mentioned, contributions throughout the whole lineup. And when the Mets were going on that big heater in June and July, that was the one constant. You got guys, you got production throughout the whole lineup, and you had guys picking up each other when they weren't producing either. I mean, another big series for Harrison LeBader, who continues to be the most clutch, one of the most clutchest guys on the team so far. Another pickup by Stearns, which is just, at the time, was it sexy? What? No, but
Oh, I hated it.
it's worked out. He's been the most clutch Mets hitter who isn't anyone named Francisco Lindor or Brandon Nimmo this year, or JD Martinez when he was going on his tear. But yeah, obviously, hopefully this is the type of game that just, because obviously the lineup's been struggling a lot. They've been one of the worst. They've been one of the worst hitting teams in terms of running and score runners in score position wise since the All-Star break. So hopefully this is the type of game where just everybody wakes up. And now going into Seattle, where they're what makes the Mariners a good team is their pitching. They're not really a great hitting wise. So if you can attack their starters and their bullpen, get some early leads, and then the pitchers just shut them down, then that's the formula on how to beat the Mariners right there.
Yeah, and they're in a bit of a skid right now, so maybe their pitching hasn't been as great. I'm not sure because I'm not in tune enough to know, but yeah, you got to capitalize on that. Granted, it did take them forever to capitalize on the Rockies, which sucks, but I also have to confess that in that first inning, when Iglesias was down in the count at one point as at bat, I was ready to text in the group chat how pissed I was about Iglesias hitting second, but thankfully I didn't have to send that text because he ended up coming through. And like you said with Bader, though, I hated that move at the time. What a find thus far. I mean, or I shouldn't say what a find, more like just what an idea by this man to just say, fuck it, let's just give the guy a 1-year deal, why not? And as of right now, I would go as far to say that if the Mets are going to keep any of the guys that are on 1-year deals, he's the guy that I would want them to keep the most out of anyone thus far. But besides that, yeah, they're going to need this in the series against the Mariners, especially because they are a pitching heavy team. But the Mets also need their pitching to step up because in today's game, granted their pitching wasn't terrible when you get to Stanek and Young, which especially Stanek, who ever since that first outing, it's been pretty good stuff from him. So liking what we're seeing from Stanek thus far as of lately. But you have David Peterson, who, listen, he got out of the gym. I will give him all of his credit there. But if this was a quality opponent and he was facing not 2024 Chris Bryant with the bases juice, I don't want to know what would have happened, but I don't think it would have been anything good. I can tell you that right now. 5 strikeouts for him, 3 walks, which some of those walks killed me. You're up 7-0. Just attack the zone. And even Danny Young late in the game, where he was throwing like these pitches like 10 feet off the plate. Like, what are you doing? There's no reason to do that when you're up by that much. But regardless, that's my one little complaint about this game, other than Peterson, where I still worry. I still worry when it's that third time through the order, because the numbers back it up. The eye test backs it up. The smell of hot dog shit backs it up that he's abysmal when the third part of the order comes around, and it's just infuriating.
Well, I think he's just showing more and more that he'd be a good reliever, because most of the time when you watch his starts through the first time of the order, he looks like a really good starting pitcher. Has his fastball working well. He gets his sliders over, gets a lot of swings and misses on that. But like you mentioned before, second, third time comes to the order, he loses control of the strike zone. He starts to get hit hard. I mean, listen, the numbers back it up in terms of expected ERA and the FIP, and he's got even a 1.4 WHIP. So the numbers aren't great, and even the eye test, you look at it, he's dominant the first time through the order. And ideally, I don't know why the Mets aren't doing it, but I've been preaching it on this podcast the last couple episodes. Just put the guy in the bullpen. Like, he'd be such a valuable bullpen piece. But then the other guys, Stanek, ever since that nightmare debut that he had against the Braves, he's looked really good. And the one pitch that I really like today, I know you mentioned the slider on your post game recap. I really like the splitter from him. That splitter was breaking, lots of swings and misses on that. But yeah, the cheating lab seems to be doing wonders on him right now. He's starting to figure it out. I mean, he had that good outing against the Twins. He should have gotten all 3 outs, but Pete decided to be a dumbass and try a dumb throw. Then he came in the St. Louis game. Just he walked the guy, but he got the first out, got the inning-ending double play, and today just nice 1-2-3 inning for him. But yeah, listen, right now the bullpen is looking a lot better, especially Danny and Alex Young. You know, Danny Young, when he first came up earlier in the year, he wasn't the greatest. He got sent down.
I didn't want to see that guy's face.
Yeah, but credit to him because he's looked a lot better. Alex Young, he's been a decent pickup so far. I'm pretty sure the only run he's allowed was in the first game against the Rockies. But other than that, he's been pretty good, and they're going to get reinforcements soon. Garrett and Reed Foley have obviously they've had a couple of outings in AA and single A and AAA, so they'll be back fairly soon. And obviously, another guy that hasn't started throwing yet, but when he comes back, he'll be a very valuable piece, and that's Dednell Nunez.
My goat.
Our goat.
But a guy that I just completely forget in the bullpen until they say he's warming up. I just constantly forget that Phil Maton exists. Like, I don't know why.
Oh, yeah, Phil Maton.
I don't know what it is with him. It's just every time they announce he's warming up, I'm like, oh yeah, you exist. Like,
oh, you're good.
Yeah, I forgot that you're even on the team. I honestly just forget about him sometimes. But yeah, with David Peterson, he would be better in the bullpen, but it's at the point where it just kind of is what it is. It's not going to happen. Then you have Ottavino, who I thought was going to do Mr. 2/3 of an inning again until he didn't today, which I still stand by what I said in the post game, where if you're going to whine to the media, you need to go out your next outing and hang your nutsack and strike out the side. He couldn't even keep the bases empty. He allowed a couple base runners, and I think it's inevitable that the writing's kind of on the wall, and I think he knows it because he wouldn't be whining to the media otherwise. But who knows? Maybe he does the Truba and whines his way to stay. You never know. Maybe he saw what happened there and he took a page out of the book. But regardless, yeah, he needs to be better, because if not, with these reinforcements that you mentioned on the horizon, it is going to be it's going to be a very short-lived time here for him, and the clock's kind of just ticking on him at this point, because Nunez passed him by far in the circle of trust. Reed Garrett is looking better now in his rehab assignments, which is a very good sign, because he was looking pretty bad early on. But in AAA, I think he's in AAA now, and I think he pitched a scoreless inning there. And then Sean Reed Foley as well, who's also higher in the circle of trust, is starting to improve right now in rehab. So the clock is ticking, man. On Ottavino, the clock is ticking. And how about, instead of whining, you hang your nuts on the baseball field? I don't know. That's just my 2 cents on that. But I'm very curious how they're going to handle this in general, because I don't know who's out. Like, who is out of this staff when those guys get healthy? Because right now it's hard to push out, like, outside of Ottavino, I don't know who you push out as bullpen, because Danny Young is making it difficult. Otherwise, I would have thought he's a sure guy to be moved, but he probably will be, because I think he has options still. And then for the third guy, I mean, I don't know who it's going to be, because Brazaban is actually... I mean, outside of that one outing against the Angels, he's looked good. And then outside of that, I mean, those are your high leverage guys like Alex Young, because you need a lefty back there. Budo, you're not moving out. Maton's not moving out. And then Stanek and Diaz aren't moving out. So I don't know what you do there. And one thing before I let you talk, I did not realize that Brazaban's 155 at 6'3". That is absolutely ridiculous, because I just have the roster pulled up. 155 at 6'3" is nuts. Please lift weights.
No, I mean, look, it's a very good problem to have when you get quality relievers back, and then you go, aside from Ottavino, who do you push out? I mean, that's a good problem to have. It's not like the problems we had before, where we had to freaking trot guys out like Drew Gagno and Wilmer Font,
or even earlier in the season when we were begging for
bullpen
out.
Yeah, guys like that. It's a good problem to have, and obviously, probably, I'd imagine it'd be one of the young brothers. It's not going to be both, because they need a lefty in that rotation, and it's unfortunate that Brooks Raley's not here, because
we got to bring it up every podcast. We got to say it,
because he would have been such a great addition for this bullpen, or just a great option to have in the bullpen. But yeah, listen, injuries happen. You got to deal with it. But so one of them will probably get. I don't know if Alex Young has any options, but obviously, like I said, Danny Young has options, so it will probably be him. So Ottavino, Danny Young, and then I don't know who for the third spot, because I would assume Reed Garrett and Dendel Nunez would have their spots locked down, but obviously Sean Reed Foley is going to come back before Dendel Nunez. So if Sean Reed Foley comes back and he's pitching well, then it's like, okay, well, obviously Nunez has to come back. But again, who do you push out of the bullpen? It's a good problem to have. And yeah, with the Ottavino one, I don't know who decided to give him Jacob Trouba's phone number, but that guy should be fired or suspended indefinitely and not be allowed within the Citi Field anymore. Because, bro, I mean, listen, Adam, you were lucky that it was Jake Diekman and it wasn't your ass right now out on the streets looking for a job. Because probably Stearns was in there in his fucking office. It's like, okay, I got to pick between shit and shit. Who's least shit though that I can fucking get rid of here? So, but listen, if you want your spot in the bullpen, pitch well. That's all you got to do, and I will give you credit if you start pitching well. But if you keep going 2/3 of an inning and keep leaving runners on base for the other guys to pick your shit up, then obviously you're not going to be here much longer.
I think I have the answers to who it's going to be. I think it's going to be Brazaban, because he has 3. I fact checked it because I wanted to see who has options. Brazaban has 3 options. Danny Young might be safe for a bit. Like there's a world where, because I thought for sure Ottavino and Danny Young are the first two guys off, but Danny Young might stay up just because he has one option left. So it's like kind of a thing where you got to use your bullets here while he's up. Otherwise, you send him down one more time, and then if you have to call him up, you're at risk of losing him later on. So I think there's a world where, since, like you mentioned, Sean Reed Foley and Reed Garrett are the first guys coming back, I think there's a world where Brazabon is option before Danny Young, which I don't love that, but it's the reality we're in, honestly.
I mean, yeah, you need lefties, and if that's going to be the reason why Brosbon's sent down, just simply because he's not a lefty, and the front office and Mendoza feels comfortable just with two lefties in that bullpen, then yeah, I guess you got to do it. But it sucks because I know he had the one bad outing, but I mean, look, it happens. Standing had the one bad outing, and he's rebounded fine since then. So yeah, I think Brosman's going to be fine. But if he's sent down because of that, even though, look, you got to do what you got to do, but it's definitely going to suck for him because he doesn't deserve to be sent down to AAA because he's had a very good season so far, both with the Marlins and the Mets.
Yeah, because outside of that, Alex Young has an option, which I didn't think he did, but he actually does have an option. And that's really it. You are you got nothing outside of that, unless the only thing that I could think of that just came to my mind, and I don't know why it took forever to, but there is a world where Nunez, they drag it out as long as possible until September, so that he could just be the September call up, and then you don't have to drop anyone from the roster, and then maybe it's just going to be Ottavino and either Young or Brazabon, and then once the roster expands, you could just have whoever up, which also makes me wonder if now Sproat's kind of just like out of the equation, unless God forbid something happens, which knock on wood, all that stuff there. But uh, which we'll talk about him because he started tonight for the first time in AAA. Did not go well at all because we'll shift to the prospect stuff here. Not a good start from him. I think he allowed like 6 or 7 runs tonight, so not good, but everyone's going to freak out. But at the end of the day, AAA is a very competitive league when it comes to hitting, like I mentioned on the last episode. So it's going to be what it is. There's literally no reason to overreact to what Sproat does unless it like becomes a bigger deal. Like, I don't know, like 4 starts in, 5 starts in. If he's repetitively doing this, then that's obviously a problem. But I think everyone needs to pump the brakes there. He went against like some pretty quality hitters too.
Yeah, going back to Nunez there, that's actually an interesting idea with him in terms of pushing him back to September. And I actually think that's what they're going to do, probably because we haven't really heard anything on him in terms of starts in the minors.
I don't even think he's thrown the
Yeah,
ball
he hasn't
yet.
even thrown yet, so I would assume that if he's going to be back, it's going to be around September time. So that actually works into what you were saying. So probably that is what they're going to do with him. So you get that extra roster spot. So you don't have to send anyone else down. But yeah, look with Sproat. I mean, look, it was his first start. Like, I'm not gonna get over the top. Listen, Senga went down there and he got roughed up in AAA for one start. So I mean, listen, it happens. And Senga's a much more proven pitcher than Brandon Sproat is. So listen, probably was a little nervous tonight, first start in AAA, and he's got to get used to the difference in hitters. But listen, I think he'll rebound fine. I'm not too concerned about him at all.
Yeah, neither mine. That's a good point that you made. Like, remember when all of us were freaking out because Senga looked pretty rough in that one game in Syracuse, and then he was starting the next game, and so much so that Mendoza was asked if they think he needs one more rehab start because he looked that bad in that one in AAA. But then we saw it happen against Atlanta, and unfortunately, we don't want to talk about how it ended, but we saw what happened for what was very short-lived from him. So there there is also that side to it where it's like quality pitchers could have bad starts in AAA. Like, it kind of is what it is. It's a very competitive league when it comes to hitting, but yeah, In terms of other reports, unfortunately, I think it was Baez that ended up dealing with an injury and he's done for the year. Unfortunately, I think he had a torn meniscus like Ronnie Mauricio had, or like Edwin Diaz had last year. So same injury there. His year's done. He might even be done for next year, honestly, too, because that's a long injury to recover from. So it really sucks because the Mets have just had the most unfortunate luck this year when it comes to their prospects with their health. Because Jet Williams, we were excited to see what he could provide this year. And unfortunately, that really hasn't gone well because he's been injured a lot of the year. Then on top of that, Drew Gilbert, very excited, and a guy that we thought maybe would get an appearance this year. And unfortunately for him, he is just not
Yeah.
played a lot of games. And then on top of that, you also have Mauricio, who we were excited for, got injured for the year. Kevin Parada has dealt with injuries. Like, it's not been a good year for injuries. It really has not been good.
Yeah, I've stated before on the podcast where God, that Mauricio injury sucks because he could have been up here. The type of guy that Stearns liked in terms of just power, hitting the ball in the air, he would have helped this. He would have helped this lineup a lot. But yeah, I mean, I know Gilbert. He's been injured most of the year and he hasn't had a lot of playing time. But even 18 games, I know. Listen, it's a small sample, so I'm not gonna freak out. But numbers aren't great. 224 average, 333 on base, 299 slugging, 632 OPS. I know it's a small sample size, but yeah, you want to see a bit better. Hopefully, he does turn it around.
Yeah. There's honestly been a lot of it sucks how much disappointment there's been in the pipeline. I mean, there's been obviously some positives, like it's not been all doom and gloom. Sprout has been obviously the best of the best. Ryan Clifford has been a very nice surprise as well in terms of how big of a jump he's took here this year, because we thought that he was going to be a guy that probably had no shot of 2025 and then definitely 2026. If he continues this, he might earn himself a spot or at least some games in 2025. Tidwell has been up and down, unfortunately. The biggest disappointment prospect wise is Alex Ramirez, though. I mean, it's getting pretty close to the end there for Alex Ramirez, but yeah, I mean, it just sucks. Right now, I don't even know what my top 5 prospects would be. I'd probably put Sprout 1, Clifford 2, and then I don't know about the rest. Like, those two, to me, though, have had the best years, and it sucks, though, because we're not going to see Clifford this year, but maybe we'll see Sprout.
Yeah, Clifford he's been decent at AAA so far. I mean, obviously, if anyone's a big average guy anymore, like obviously if you look at his average, it's not great.
Oh,
But
the Get Off My Lawn crowd
yeah,
hates him.
but listen, the 820 OPS, solid for what you want in AA. And he's hitting home runs. That's what you want to see from the type. I mean, look, you see now in today's MLB, there's guys don't really live off the average anymore. It's all OPS and stuff. And I mean, prime example. I mean, hopefully he could become like maybe not at the level, but maybe slimmer, but like Kyle Schwarber. Yeah, a guy who could maybe lead off, get on base, and just crush nukes.
And it's funny that we mentioned that you mentioned, I should say, Kyle Schwarber, because I saw something yesterday. I forgot where I saw it. Otherwise, I'd obviously give credit there. But so I apologize to whoever said it sees it. I apologize that you're not getting your credit. But I doubt you're seeing this either way. But they said that despite Kyle Schwarber having a lower batting average over the years than Luis Arias, like, think about the difference in batting average points between those two. Kyle Schwarber has reached base and had more total bases than Luis Arias over the past year or two. It was. That just shows how little you should take into batting average and how you should take more stock into things like OPS and like WAR, F-WAR, and all that stuff. But that also surprised me a bit. It surprised me a bit, but it also didn't, because it's like I'm not the biggest Arias guy because I think he gets glazed because of his batting average. But it surprised me a bit.
Well, no, I mean, that's just more the numbers and the math backing it up because Luis Ariz is just a
A
contact
singles
guy
merchant.
getting a single. So if you're just getting a single, that's one base. But if you're a guy
True.
like Kyle Schwarber who's hitting the ball deep and getting a lot of home runs, I mean, you compare that. A single is one base, home run is four bases. You're getting four times more the bases on one home run just off that one single. And Schwarber hits a lot of home runs, so he's racking up a lot of bases at that point just because you keep times it by four. So the math just makes sense and it backs up that easily.
True. It's just because of how big of a difference that also. I guess that's why it threw me off. Just because Arise has been hitting like close to 400 even, and then Schwarber's hitting like below 200. So, but again, it just shows either way. At the end of the day, batting average really only means so much, and it really shouldn't matter that much at the end of the day. Uh, Also, context matters with a lot of these things, but that's also something that is just forgotten with everything in sports, unfortunately, mostly in hockey. But we we won't go down that rabbit hole. But yeah, outside of that, there's really not much else to discuss in terms of the games here and in terms of the prospects. As of right now, though, like we mentioned, the Mets sitting in a spot where they are a half a game up on the Atlanta Braves. They are currently, I want to get the division. They're 7.5 out of the division from the Philadelphia Phillies, which the Mets have 7 games against the Phillies, and they roll into that Seattle series. I gave my opinion on the post game, and I'm sure you feel the same. Where because of the fact that they've pissed on themselves so much this road trip, I feel it's a mandatory sweep. Will it happen? Probably not. I realistically expect 2-1, but I feel like you really need to salvage this road trip and get the sweep.
Yeah, so just to finish up with the prospect talk, I mean, look, a lot of these guys, like it's nice to have them, but a good reason for prospects is because if you have a lot of them, you can trade them and get valuable and get very good pieces. I mean, listen, the Mets might very well trade for a big bat. If they don't get Soto, they might very well trade for an ace next offseason if they don't sign a guy like Corbin Burns in free agency. So that's one of the benefit. Like, sure, it's great to have these guys and develop them through your system because obviously you have the control over them and they're going to be cheaper. But I mean, look at teams like the Dodgers have such a great farm system, and look how many guys they trade away for big impact players. You can think of multiple trades: the Mookie Betts trade, the Manny Machado trade, the trade where they brought in Scherzer and Trey Turner. Like they've given up a lot of guys, and then similar thing. Andrew Friedman and not Andrew, AJ Preller and the San Diego Padres don't give a fuck about prospects. I mean, look how many prospects they deal. They dealt so many great prospects like CJ Abrams to the Nationals to get Juan Soto. To only 2 years later reflip those guys. I mean, to reflip Soto to get more prospects from the Yankees in return. And then you just saw they just unloaded their farm system again to get Tanner Scott and I forgot who else they got. The other good reliever that the guy I'm forgetting his name. But yeah, it's just showing it's like, yeah, it's great to have these prospects, but listen, some of them might pan out, and some of them you could easily use as trade bait to get better players. Then now going on to the Mariners series. Yeah, I said before the 10-game road trip I wanted 7-3. Now it's still possible that they can go 7-3. They just have to sweep the Mariners. Now, look, can they do it? Sure, but it's probably going to be tough. I mean, the Mariners are losing again right now. They're losing 3-0 to the Tigers, so they keep free falling, which only makes sense that they're just going to rebound nicely against the Mets because that's the type of stuff that happens. But no, look, if they win the series, they go 2-1, and they would go 2-1 against the Mariners. I'll take it. It's 6-4. Will I exactly be in love with 6-4? No, but at least they're not under 500 in this road trip, which thank God, because considering how it started off, it could have easily turned bad. So, like I said, I'll take 6-4. I won't be excited with it, but get me 7-3 because that'd just be a great road trip. And then you obviously have the homestand with the A's and the Marlins and the Orioles.
Yeah. I mean, I agree that you at the least have to win. and 6-4, I guess, is a more palatable considering how they started, but it's still gonna bother me. It's just still gonna really annoy me. Also, Bonnie, laugh, what's going on? Um, but yeah, in terms of one more discussion I wanted to bring up, because you brought it up in our group chat, so I wanted to bring the conversation here. And I don't think you voiced your opinion on it. What do you, oh no, you did, because you said you want the Phillies and Diamondbacks to split in the series that they have. I don't know. There's really that part of me that's leaning towards I'd rather just the Phillies lose, because one, I get satisfaction out of them losing, and two, I want the division. I want the division at this point. Like, you have 7 games against the Phillies where, you control your own destiny, which might cause stress on my mental health watching those games down the stretch. But I'd rather that. Like, I want to watch in September. Like, I want to be glued because the Mets are playing for the division and playing meaningful games against the Phillies in September. And I don't know. I think it would be better both for I think it'd be better for baseball, better for obviously the Mets, better for the Phillies, just in terms of getting more competition for each other. Bad for my mental health, but I want to see the Mets grab home field too, because I'm at the point where I don't think the Diamondbacks are slowing down. I'm at the point where I don't think the Padres are slowing down. And like I mentioned too in the group chat, I think if the Mets either way could salvage some games there against the Diamondbacks. So, you know what? The Phillies go 1-3 against the Diamondbacks here. Go 1-3, because the Mets, if they could salvage themselves by sweeping the Diamondbacks to make up some of that ground, and then the Phillies still lose a good amount of games out of that, I think that's a perfect world for me.
So I said 2-2 just because look, it's even, not really either the Phillies or Diamondbacks will be breaking away from the Mets at that point. So I'm like, give me a nice split. But if I were to rather pick which one, I would rather the Mets attack. Obviously, it's the division. Because one, I want retribution for 2022 because they should have fucking won that division and they fucked it up right at the end. And also, listen, you win the division and you get home field advantage in the wild card, which it's much better than either going to San Diego or Arizona. And listen, I want to be there at Citi Field for the wild card round. I want to be there. I need to put demons to rest after watching Max Scherzer fucking shit the bed in Game 1.
Yeah, Joe Musgrove hanging his nuts in Game 3 for me.
I need retribution. So, yeah, look, whatever happens. It's not in the Mets' control, but I'll take a split or maybe even a 3-1 Diamondbacks win. Probably because I think probably the Mets will have an easier time catching the Phillies than the Diamondbacks or the Padres, because right now those two are just rolling right now. And look, they're only 7.5 games back of the Phillies right now, and you got to play them 7 more times. And I'm not sure what the Phillies' strength of schedule is for the rest of the year. I don't know off the top of my head, but
I could look.
Yeah, probably. I want the division.
If only those stupid Dodgers were able to freaking handle business against the Phillies a little bit more. Like, the one time I'm ever rooting for the Dodgers, they let me down.
Or if they couldn't have not blown it against the Padres. Thank you, Blake Trinan, by the way.
So the Phillies have the 19th hardest schedule remaining. The Mets have the 17th, so it's really not that wide of a margin. In terms of the opponents, I'll read off because obviously that could, dictate how you personally view it. The Diamondbacks right now, who are on fire, so that's a little bit tougher than maybe there's credit there for. Then they play the Marlins, which, just like the Mets, the Phillies also have their fair share of fits against the Marlins outside of that wild card series last year where they just outright annihilated them. Then the Washington Nationals, which that they are probably going to just dog walk them unless they're continuing the spiral at that point. Then they play the Braves, which gets very interesting because it's like, what do we want to happen in that series? I don't know how the standings are going to look 2 weeks from today, so hard to say that. The Royals, tough opponent there. Astros, tough opponent because they're going to be fighting for the division, I'd imagine. The Braves, again, that one is a 4-game series, which is also that also could dictate a lot of if the Mets could even get the division at that rate. Because if we're talking about the Braves sweeping there, then unless the Mets create over the next few weeks like a very sizable gap between themselves and the Braves, that could change things a lot. Where, the Braves maybe even fight for the division at that rate. But if they could create a sizable gap and go on a hot run, and the Braves continue to spiral, then it makes it easier to, I don't want to say these words, but root for the Braves, I guess, in that series. Then they play the Blue Jays, joke of an opponent, 4 games against the Marlins. Then they play the Rays. It's probably like their easiest stretch. But then they play the Mets for 3 games, play the Brewers, Mets 4 games, Cubs, Nationals. So sounds about accurate to 19th for their remaining strength of schedule.
Well, the Phillies just went up 3-1 against the Diamondbacks right now.
I always wanted the wild card anyway. It was the wild card anyway. No, but we'll see what happens. It's hard to, have this conversation in August. I think once we see what happens between the Phillies and the Braves and get the numbers of how many games out each team is at that juncture, we'll get more of like a stance on this topic. But for right now, I just want the Mets to keep controlling their own destiny. Like, just win games and you'll get in at the end of the day. It is what it is. But yeah, I think that's really all we have to cover, unless you have anything that you want to talk about before we wrap things up.
Well, look, if the Mets want to make a nice sizable gap for themselves right now, they very much have the opportunity to do so. Because obviously they're on a 2-game win streak right now with beating the Rockies last night and this afternoon. They have a 3-game set in Seattle. So let's say they win the series, they go 2-1. At that point, they were 4-1. Now you have a 3-game series against the A's and a 3-game set against the Marlins. You sweep both of them and go 6-0. Now you have a 10-1 stretch, which could easily just build a nice gap there. And you probably at that point 12, 13 games over 500.
Yeah, and that's where they need to get.
But at the same time, we said take advantage of the Angels, sweep the Rockies, and they didn't do it. So listen, I always said a couple weeks ago when we were discussing about potentially putting on a race for the division, the games that scared me the most was against the shittier opponents, because we know the Mets love to play down to their opponents.
And I hate that it's true. I hate how true it is. And I hate even more that they got off to the start they did, because right now the division would be even more of a conversation, because even if they just were like a quarter better than what they were then, they'd be sitting like 3 games out of the division, and it's like more of a fight and more of a realistic conversation. But what's done is done, unfortunately, and you can't erase what.
And that was part of the reason why they lost the division in 2022. I mean, look, the most obvious one, and there's no excuse you can make for that team, because you can't just go to Atlanta and get swept like that and just get bitch slapped by the Braves like that. Like, no excuse for that. But really, they should have swept the A's. DeGrom somehow got lit up in Oakland that last start of the series. They got swept by the Cubs. Bassett had that horrific start. Peterson could barely get out of the first inning. And they dropped games to the Pirates. Like yeah, I understand. Like, inexcusable. You can't get swept by the Braves in that situation. But they lost that division because they couldn't take care of the bad opponents.
Yeah, and honestly, that's what's kind of happening with the Phillies a bit. They were struggling against some pretty bad teams. Like, they were losing to the A's out of the All-Star break, and some other pretty bad teams there. So again, it's not just a Mets thing, but we'll see what happens down the stretch here. Of course, we're going to be here to cover all of it, so stay tuned. And yeah, we'll be back at it again after the Mariners series, and then they have that homestand coming up, which I will be here for part of that. Once it gets to the Orioles series, I believe that's when I will not be home. So at that point, I will not be able to cover those games, but Matt, of course, will do all that. So yeah, we will, of course, continue to have these conversations, though. But before we end it, please be sure to leave a like on the stream if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you guys are new, especially if you're Met fans. Turn on your notifications so you know when I upload or go live on the channel. And I will see you guys in the next one.